This is the Late Round Podcast with your host, JJ Zacharisa.
What's up, everyone? It's JJ Zacharisa, the editor-in-chief at FanDuel and at NumberFire.com, and this is episode 420 of the Late Round Podcast, one of many shows that are part of the FanDuel Podcast Network. Thanks for tuning in. Betting on the NBA Finals is great. Betting on the NBA Finals risk-free is even better. FanDuel Sportsbook is giving you a chance to bet on Game 1 of the Finals risk-free with their exclusive single-game parlays. Simply place a 3-leg or more parlay for Game 1 prior to tip-off to be eligible for the offer, and follow along as the game unfolds. If you don't win your bet, FanDuel will refund your bet up to $10 in site credit. What do you have to lose? For more details, visit sportsbook.fanduel.com. Must be 21 years old. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Now let's get to this week's 10 trends. CeeDee Lamb had a 16.2% target share in Week 1, almost a 20% target share in Week 2, and then in Week 3, that dropped to 10.7%. He also saw his snap rate drop from 82% during his first 2 weeks to 60% against the Seahawks. It appeared as though Lamb was a little bit banged up in that game, so I'm not looking too hard into this. It could be a reason we saw Cedric Wilson do what he did, with Wilson playing 16 snaps from the slot in that game. Keep playing CeeDee Lamb as you usually would, but keep an eye on the injury report this week. The only 4 players with a 25% target share or better in each of their first 3 games so far this year are DeAndre Hopkins, Allen Robinson, Keenan Allen, and Odell Beckham. Keenan Allen seems to be clicking with Justin Herbert, but we've got to keep in mind that they had really good matchups over the last 2 weeks, especially last week against Carolina. Allen Robinson finally ended up scoring this past week. Hopkins is balling out. And then there's OBJ. Despite his target share being so strong, it's still hard to call him a buy low. This is basically exactly what we saw last year from Odell Beckham. I'm still looking at him more as a hold than a buy. Joe Mixon leads the league in running back rush share. He's seen 96.3% of Cincinnati's running back rushes in 2020. The problem is, he's still seen just a 6.6% target share. So things are pretty in line with what we've seen historically with Joe Mixon. If there's one piece of optimism to grab onto and run with, it's not just that they get Jacksonville this week, but it's that Joe Burrow looks legit. If the Bengals continue to improve offensively, touchdowns and more opportunity will come for Joe Mixon. But like OBJ, I still view Mixon more as a hold than a buy. You guys know how I am with running backs who don't catch a ton of passes. The hope is that Mixon would be used more as a receiver this year, but that hasn't happened yet. After seeing 84% of Pittsburgh's running back rushes in Week 2, James Conner saw that share drop to 56% in Week 3. This is just something to monitor moving forward. The Steelers got all of their running backs involved this past week. That can't be the best sign in the world for James Conner, but I wouldn't be overly panicked about the usage since he's still seeing a decent enough target share. The Jets have by far the lowest pass-to-rush ratio in neutral game scripts this year at 0.57. But here's the thing. They've also ran just 11 plays in total when games have been within 6 points. Both of the LA teams are the only teams with neutral script ratios under 0.9 right now, aside from the Jets. And those teams, plus Cleveland, New England, and Minnesota, all have run the ball more than they've thrown it when games have been that close. But that's the trend. Those are the most run-heavy teams in football so far. Trend 6 is that Austin Eckler has seen a 12.9% and 22.9% target share in his 2 games with Justin Herbert. That number was just 3.5% with Tyrod Taylor in Week 1. You guys might remember in Week 1 where I talked about Eckler on this show, on this podcast, on the 15 Transactions episode, and I called him a hold. The main reason being they were facing Kansas City and Carolina in Weeks 2 and Week 3. If the Chargers go back to Tyrod Taylor, I'm going to be nervous again. We all should be nervous. We should have some concerns given that Week 1 usage. But for now, Eckler is back to being a very usable starter for your fantasy teams. Though I wish he was the goal line back in that offense to really give us a super high ceiling. Nick Chubb hasn't finished a single game with a target share above 5% this year. For some context, he averaged a 7.5% target share per game when Kareem Hunt returned to action last year. Cleveland's targeted their running backs on 20.5% of their targeted throws, which is actually pretty average compared to the rest of the league. But this, along with the fact that Chubb continues to see pretty average running back rush share numbers, those are the reasons I'm still not super high on him from here on out. I still view him more as an RB2 than an RB1 despite what he did in week 3. And like I said on yesterday's show, I'll take the L at the end of the season if I need to. I'm just being honest with how I see this situation. New Orleans has targeted their wide receivers on just 40.9% of their targeted attempts this year. They haven't targeted wide receivers at that low of a rate since 2013, and their wideouts last year had a 52% share. They actually haven't been below 50% since 2014. So much of this has to do with Michael Thomas being out and them just force-feeding Alvin Kamara. But Drew Brees also is tied for last in the league in deep ball rate. He's thrown at 15-plus air yards on just 8.7% of his throws. It's not a very fun offense for fantasy football unless you've got Alvin Kamara on your team. Trends 9 and 10 are all about the Seattle Seahawks because they've become one of the most fun teams in fantasy football. Not just because of Russell Wilson either, but because of the defense. And speaking of that defense, get this. The Seahawks have given up 76 wide receiver receptions and 1,136 wide receiver yards this year. The next closest teams have allowed 49 wide receiver receptions and 736 wide receiver yards. You've got to start players against the Seahawks right now. And then the last trend this week, this is a quick show. It's about Russell Wilson. Since 2011, quarterbacks have thrown a passing touchdown for every 161 or so yards. So far this year, Russell Wilson has thrown one for every 66 passing yards. Based on that alone, he's thrown over 8 more touchdowns than he should have. He has a 13.6% touchdown rate. That's significantly higher than the NFL record. He's very unlikely going to come close to maintaining this. But it looks like we're probably in store for one of those outlier type seasons. I would be shocked if that touchdown rate drops to his career average of 6.2%. The Seahawks are far more pass heavy this year, and that's going to help Wilson maintain pretty amazing numbers. I'm here for letting Russ cook. That's going to do it for today's show, though. Thanks to all of you for listening. If you've yet to subscribe to the Late Round Podcast, make sure you are by searching for it pretty much anywhere podcasts can be found. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter at LateRoundQB. Thanks, everyone. I know this show is quick every week, but I hope you enjoyed it. I'll be back in your ears tomorrow with the weekly matchup show.